All right, everyone. So it's 1:04 p.m. Eastern. So I think we're good to go. If anyone else joins, they can always jump in. But we also have this webinar being recorded. So there's also going to be a recording that's going to be saved and shared with everyone. So if anyone's late or if anyone's running late, they can always get a recording later. We're just going to kickstart right now. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining this customer exclusive webinar brought to you by MeazureUp. I'll start with a quick introduction of myself. My name is Naval Shetty. I'm the account manager here at MeazureUp. I'm hoping all of y'all already know about MeazureUp, but just for the sake of this webinar, I'm going to do a quick introduction of MeazureUp as well. So at MeazureUp, we build custom-made software for multi-unit enterprises, essentially to drive operational consistency. We have two main modules. We'll start off with the audit app. The audit app is essentially built for in-store inspections. So essentially managers, DMs, anyone who carries out monthly, daily, quarterly, or yearly inspections uses the audit app to conduct their inspections. So it has a lot of fun stuff like scoring. You can take pictures, you can access reports and get a lot of real-time data. On the other hand, we have a task management module that we call daily checks. Daily checks is essentially built for, as the name suggests, daily checklists. It is built for in-store users to use on a day-to-day basis. Again, like the audit app, it allows a lot of cool functionalities, but since we'll be covering a lot in today's webinar about the daily checks app, I'll leave that for the meaty part of the webinar itself. I'm going to quickly jump in to what you can expect from today's webinar. We'll start off with the problems with paper checklists. So we obviously work with a lot of independent stores, restaurants, and a lot of multi-unit restaurants as well. So we interviewed a lot of our customers, and we made a long list of the problems they face using paper checklists and how the migration from paper to digital helped them. So the goal today is to highlight few of the problems with paper checklists and to really show you how we can flip those problems around or solve for those problems when we use a digital checklist solution. With that, we'll also cover the benefits of digital checklist solution, that's daily checks, and I'll also get a chance to show you a lot of how the dashboard side, the reporting side, and the backend side of the software looks. We also have an open floor in the end based on the time. It could be 10 minutes, it could be slightly less or slightly more as well. But during that time, you feel free, you can ask any questions. You can feel free to ask any questions even during the webinar, but it'll be limited to popping it in the chat. And myself, along with the other panelists, we'd be happy to pick it up as and when we see it. During the Q&A, my fellow panelist, Zach Tenser, who's also the head of customer success here at MeazureUp, he'd be assisting. He'd be happy to answer any questions. So Zach and the back end is going to be looking at all your questions, and he may jump in anytime to answer them or to assist me with that as well. So without further ado, we'll jump right into the aspects of paper checklists and why it's still in this day and age still being used and how we can mitigate that, so to say, or mitigate the problems with paper checklists. So what we did was we interviewed a lot of our customers, or we spoke with a lot of our customers, I beg your pardon, and we made a long list of all the problems with paper checklists that they faced before going digital. And we essentially subcategorize that into three main categories. The first one is store visibility and accountability. The next is finding insights from the paper checklist that you use. And the third is how paper checklist is not built for food safety, especially taking the route of health and safety protocols, or for example, when a health inspector walks in. So we feel these three subsections would really summarize what the problems are with paper checklists and how we mitigate that using a digital solution. So I'm going to start off with the first problem statement that I posed in the previous slide, which was store visibility and accountability. Now we know how the restaurant industry works. It is busy, it's demanding, and there's a lot going on. And when there's a lot going on, it is not always easy to go ahead first, look for your paper checklist and take out time and efficiently invest time in completing it manually using a pen and paper. The other aspect is the communication aspect is if you submit a paper checklist or if you complete it, how does someone who worked with you, like a teammate or a peer or a manager, know that you've submitted that checklist and know that everything is operating smoothly. So with paper checklists, one of the most important things is we look to bridge that communication gap of how everyone is well informed and gets real-time data with these paper checklists, and how we can make it easier for multiple people to use it at the same time as well. So for that, we essentially start off with the communication gap, which is we have communication or summary emails that we send out every morning to the team to inform how the previous day went. Aside from that, we also have options to show them real-time data. So I'm going to quickly jump in to something we call the daily digest email. So this is for starters, this is something that goes out every morning to your team, your management, or any stakeholder. And it gives you a summary of the previous day. So it shows you how many checklists were submitted. It also shows you if there were any missed checklists and if any actions were created. The idea here is, rather than having to log in every single day and get and see a detailed report, this just is meant to be a summarized view of what the previous day looks like. You also have the option to get real-time data during the day itself. You don't have to wait until the next day. And for that, we have something called the daily view. And this is what the daily checks dashboard looks like. This is just for clarity, this is our demo account. So you'll see a lot of random data that we've thrown in just for the sake of this webinar. So in the daily view, this is essentially a summarized version of how your day is looking. So in this case, if you notice on the top, you'll notice the three checklists that were due, one at 12, one at 3, one at 6. You also have all the locations that's under your purview. Now, just to picture this in terms of paper, this is essentially more than 15 sheets of paper worth of data, and you'd have to go through all of them to find what you're looking for. But in this case, everything is clearly available in this one dashboard that we call Daily View. You have the option to select any date you're looking for. So you can check today, you can check yesterday, or any other date in the month or the days prior as well. The green check mark indicates the checklist has been submitted. The X indicates the checklist has been missed. And we also have an NA option, which indicates the checklist was not applicable for that location. Now, if you want to see real-time data or real-time how things are operating at your store level, all you have to do is as simple as going ahead and clicking on the green check mark. What that does is it takes you to the checklist itself. So it shows you all the temperatures that were submitted. So these are for your temp log. It shows you any yes, no, and any feedback. For example, how do your flows look? Amazing. It also gives you an idea of who submitted the checklist. And if there's any picture, you can actually see the picture itself. Excuse that particular picture. It's just a demo picture that we threw in there for the sake of this webinar. So you essentially can see all the information real time with any checklist that was submitted. And you can also see, for example, the 12 p.m. checklist was missed. So you can also get a sense of which checklist was missed using this particular view. Now, if I get back to where we started, which is using paper, we essentially picture using tons of sheets of paper to check that level of data, as against using that one dashboard that makes things a lot simpler. And you always have the benefit of submitting an image. So if something's wrong, if you're using paper, you ideally probably click the picture and you may send it via iMessage, WhatsApp to the person in charge and hope it gets through and gets fixed. But in this case, you can attach the image and it notifies, if you open it as an action, it notifies the right person that something's wrong and needs to be fixed. So it makes things a lot easier and bridges that communication gap. So it really drives store visibility and accountability. The second category is finding insights from checklists. Using paper, I imagine in your store, you'd have a filing cabinet. If you're using paper checklists, you'd have tons of sheets of paper for the last weeks, months, and maybe even years. And if you want to make sense of all the data or all the checklists, you'd have to go through all the sheets of paper one by one, or maybe manually input them into an Excel. That obviously sounds troublesome and is very time consuming. And as they say in the restaurant industry, time is money. So we try to bridge that and make it all a lot easier. So what we did essentially is we made putting the data together is a lot easier if you use the custom dashboards that we have in place. So for that, I'll take you through a particular dashboard that we call the submission dashboard. Sorry, give me a minute, please. It appears that, yeah, it appears that I was trying to switch and it got me there. So we have something called the submission dashboard, where you essentially get a summary of all the data that you want to analyze, and you can filter that out by today, you can filter it out by week, month, or even any custom range that you'd like. It gives you a clear picture of the number of checklists submitted and missed. So just to put this in context with paper, this is almost 50 sheets of paper worth of data, all available in with one click of a button. So you can readily filter out any checklist. I've filtered out the kitchen and temp log. You can also filter out any location. And these graphs up top show you the trend line. So the yellow indicates missed checklists. So clearly you can see that we're going in the wrong direction because the missed checklist is increasing and we don't want that. And if we want to solve for that, all you have to do is click on a particular location and you get all the individual data or all the location level data as well. So this shows how much time a checklist took to submit and which checklist was missed. This also makes it very easy to check for pencil whipping. Now, in this case, a checklist took a minute and 27 seconds. But if you know from your experience, the kitchen and temp log should ideally take maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes or maybe half an hour. If it's taken a minute, you clearly get an idea of pencil whipping. So it's as simple as clicking on the checklist and it takes you to the detailed report of the checklist itself. So you can see what was inputted. You can make sense about if it was pencil whipped, what kind of information was put in there, all the yeses and nos. And this really helps you drill down into seeing all the data clearly and make sense of it together. We also have something called a task dashboard. Now, the whole idea of submitting checklists is to ensure everything is working smoothly and make it easier to assess it at the end of the day. But when you're using sheets of paper, finding bottlenecks in solutions is always hard, and it requires you to either put it all on Excel and spend a lot of time building the report or going through sheets of paper. But in this case, in the task dashboard, I've selected a specific date range. I've selected a checklist, which is the kitchen and temp log, and I selected a set task saying any issues with equipment. Obviously, we don't want any issue with our equipment. So clearly 100% of the time this past week, we've had issues with equipment. So you can click on the yes option and see which locations are facing issues with equipment. You could either check that particular checklist for more information, or you could contact the person in charge and figure out what's going wrong with that particular equipment and get it fixed real time. So we essentially built this dashboard to drill down into a problem and really find the areas of concern. So it's no longer areas of concern, it's easier to address. Going back to the last aspect, which is not built for food business or the health and safety side of the food business. Now picture a busy day in your store and a health inspector essentially walks in unannounced and he or she wants all the information in terms of your temp logs. You'd have to run back to your back office or your filing cabinet, pull out all the sheets of paper, make sure everything is fine, and hope that A, it's not messy, and B, most importantly, it's actually completed and it's all filed properly. All this while we know that having paper in a kitchen, especially when there's live fires, can be a fire hazard. So how we tailored this is we built a dashboard that makes it very simple to print temp logs or print any data that essentially a health inspector would want. We essentially like to call it the logs by report. While I pull that up, so in the logs by report, you essentially choose the location you want to get the report for, choose the checklist. So in this case, it's a kitchen and temp log. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the kitchen and temp log. I'm going to select a date range. So assume they just want a week worth of data in the month of March. So I'm going to select a week worth of data, hit OK. So this gives you all the data that is essentially tens and hundreds of sheets of paper in terms of temp logs. You can get it with one click for the date range and for the location you'd like. It's as simple as going ahead, downloading this as PDF, printing it out, and handing this over to the health inspector. At the same time, you can filter out any unnecessary information if they're just looking for your protein temps, so you can get that information as well. The idea here is to make it as easy as possible to go ahead and get the data in one click and be able to print it out and hand it over to the health inspector. Moving on to this is all the dashboard side of things. Just to summarize, we have obviously a lot of features. I've gone on and on about it, but this on the right shows you what a mobile checklist looks like. It flows exactly like a paper checklist where you can have a lot of yes and no tasks. You can have temperature tasks. You can have drop down tasks as well. This is the mobile view, which we're happy to show you in the Q&A section if you'd like to see what a checklist looks like in your mobile. The goal here is to make it as easy as possible and save as much time. So when you're using a mobile checklist, you can fill it out at a time, and as soon as you submit, others will be aware as well. Or you can have multiple people using your checklist as well, using checklists at the same time as well. So that summarizes the Daily Checks app and how we believe that it solves for the three main issues with paper, as I mentioned previously, which was store visibility, accountability, finding insights from your checklist and making sense and finding bottlenecks. And it's not really built for the food service business because it's not intuitive and it makes it troublesome when a health inspector walks in. What we encourage as next steps before jumping into the Q&A is feel free to send us your checklist at success@MeazureUp. We know that moving from paper to a digital solution is not always easy and it requires some ramp up or some training period. So what we strongly encourage is send us your checklist at success@measureup.com. We'll digitize them as soon as we can. We're happy to jump on a call with you and suggest ways to improve it or take you through how it looks on the digital platform as well. The other aspect is we are open for you to test it out in your locations and get a sense and a feel of what it's like to use a digital checklist. And we believe strongly that when you use a digital checklist, it clearly stands out and you will clearly see the differences that I pointed out as against using a paper checklist. You can also scan this barcode on the right if you'd like to sign up to getting your checklist digitized, and we'd have our team reach out to you to discuss this further. But with that, I'd like to thank you for joining this webinar. It was our version of a digital checklist that we call Daily Checks.